The tray was heavy, not just physically heavy, though it did weigh a good 15 pounds with all those champagne glasses balanced on it. It was heavy in the way things become when you've been carrying them for too long. When you've been invisible for too long. Elena moved through the ballroom like water flowing around rocks. Step, pause, offer a glass, smile politely, move on. The guests never really looked at her face. Their eyes would dart to the champagne, pluck a glass from her tray and return to their conversations without missing a beat. Sometimes they'd grab 2 glasses at once. Sometimes they wouldn't even say thank you. She was used to it by now. 3 years. That's how long she'd been working at the Grandview Hotel. 3 years of black uniforms, polished shoes that pinched her toes, and trays that seemed to get heavier with each passing month. The Grandview wasn't just any hotel. It was the kind of place where politicians held fundraisers, where business deals worth millions happened over dinner, where people wore watches that cost more than most people's cars. Tonight was the annual charity gala. The biggest event of the year. The ballroom looked like something out of a movie. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling like frozen fireworks. Round tables covered in white silk filled the space, each one decorated with flowers that probably cost more than Elena's weekly paycheck. The stage at the far end of the room held a beautiful grand piano, its black surface so polished you could see your reflection in it. Elena tried not to look at the piano too much. It hurt. She weaved between tables, offering champagne to women in designer gowns and men in custom suits. They talked about vacations in the Mediterranean, about their children's private schools, about stock markets and real estate investments. Elena heard everything and nothing at the same time. After 3 years, the conversations all blended together into one long hum of wealth and privilege. A woman in an emerald green dress waved her hand dismissively when Elena offered her a glass. No, I'm waiting for the white wine, she said, not even glancing up from her phone. Elena nodded and moved on, even though she'd just come from the bar where they'd specifically told her to distribute the champagne first. In the corner of the room, she spotted the hotel manager, Richard, talking urgently into his phone. His face was red, and he kept running his hand through his thinning hair. That wasn't a good sign. Richard only got that stressed when something was going very wrong. Elena made her way back to the service entrance, her tray now empty. The kitchen was chaos. Servers rushed in and out, carrying trays of appetizers that looked more like tiny pieces of art than food. The head chef was yelling about the timing on the main course. Someone had dropped a tray of shrimp cocktails and 2 people were on their hands and knees cleaning it up. "Did you hear?" whispered Jamie, another server, as he grabbed a tray of canapes. The piano player canceled. Elena's heart skipped. "What?" "Yeah, some famous guy. Victor something. His flight got delayed because of storms. He's not going to make it." Elena felt something twist in her chest. She glanced toward the ballroom where that beautiful piano sat waiting on stage. Empty. Silent. She knew that feeling too well. 5 years ago, Elena had been someone different. She'd had a scholarship to one of the best music schools in the country. She'd practiced 8 hours a day, her fingers flying over piano keys, her teachers calling her gifted, talented, special. She'd dreamed of concert halls and recordings and a life dedicated to music. Then her mom got sick. It started with fatigue, then the doctor's appointments, then the word that changes everything, cancer. Suddenly, scholarship or no scholarship, Elena had to choose. Stay in school while her mom went through chemotherapy alone or come home and help. Take care of her. Be there. It wasn't really a choice at all. The medical bills piled up fast. Insurance covered some of it, but not enough. Never enough. Elena took the job at the Grandview because it paid better than most server positions, and because the tips from wealthy guests could be generous. She told herself it was temporary, just until her mom got better, just until the bills were paid. 3 years later, her mom was in remission, thank God. But the debt remained, and somehow the temporary job had become her life. The piano in her apartment, the one she'd saved up for in high school, sat in the corner of her living room. She'd put a blanket over it 6 months ago because looking at it hurt too much. Sometimes late at night, when she couldn't sleep, she'd sit at the bench and rest her fingers on the keys without pressing down, remembering what it felt like to play, to lose herself in music. But she never actually played anymore. It hurt too much to remember what she'd lost. Elena. "More champagne, table 7. The bar manager's voice snapped her back to reality. She grabbed a fresh tray and headed back into the ballroom. The guests were getting louder now, the alcohol loosening their conversations. A man in a navy suit nearly bumped into her, too busy gesturing wildly while telling some story to watch where he was going. Elena twisted smoothly to avoid him, years of practice keeping the tray steady. On stage, a woman in a sleek black dress approached the microphone. She was one of the event organizers. Elena recognized her from previous galas. "Good evening, ladies and gentlemen," the woman said, her voice projecting across the ballroom. "We're so thrilled you could join us tonight for our annual charity gala." Polite applause rippled through the crowd. "As you know, tonight we're raising money for music education programs in underfunded schools across the city. We believe every child deserves the chance to experience the transformative power of music." Elena felt a bitter laugh catch in her throat. The irony wasn't lost on her. These people would write checks tonight to help kids learn music, then go back to ignoring the woman who'd given up her musical dreams to serve them drinks. "And now," the woman continued, "we're honored to present our evening's entertainment. Please welcome world-renowned pianist Victor Ashford." She gestured toward the stage with a flourish. Nothing happened. The woman's smile froze. She glanced toward the wings, confusion crossing her face. Richard, the manager, rushed onto the stage and whispered something in her ear. Elena watched as the woman's expression changed from confusion to panic. I apologize," the woman said into the microphone, her polished composure cracking. "It seems Mr. Ashford has been delayed. We're working on the situation." Murmurs spread through the crowd, not angry yet but heading that direction. These were people used to getting exactly what they paid for, exactly when they expected it. Elena set down her tray on a service table. Her hands were shaking slightly and she wasn't sure why. Maybe it was seeing that piano sitting there, still silent, still empty. Maybe it was 3 years of being invisible finally catching up with her. Maybe it was the memory of who she used to be, haunting her like a ghost. She took a deep breath and made a decision that terrified her. Before she could talk herself out of it, before logic and fear could stop her, Elena walked toward Richard. He was surrounded by other staff members, all talking urgently, trying to figure out what to do. "Excuse me," she said quietly. No one heard her. "Excuse me," she said again, louder this time. Richard turned, irritation flashing across his face. "Not now, Elena, we have a crisis." "I can play," she interrupted. He stared at her like she'd spoken a foreign language. "What?" "The piano. I can play it." For a moment, everyone just looked at her. The invisible waitress who'd served them for 3 years. Then someone actually laughed. The laugh came from Derek, one of the senior servers who'd been at the Grand View longer than anyone. He didn't mean it cruelly, Elena knew that. It was just so absurd. The waitress who usually brought people their drinks now claiming she could replace a world-famous pianist. Richard's face went through several expressions at once, confusion, disbelief, then something that looked almost like hope. Before his professional mask slammed back down. "Elena, this isn't the time for jokes," he said, already turning away. "We need to find a real solution." "I'm not joking." Her voice came out stronger than she expected. "I studied at Juilliard. Well, I had a full scholarship there. I can play." That made him pause. He turned back slowly, studying her face like he was seeing her for the first time in 3 years. "You went to Juilliard?" The skepticism was clear in his voice. "1 semester. Then I had to leave. Family emergency." Elena didn't elaborate. She'd learned that people didn't really want to hear about sick parents and medical bills. It made them uncomfortable. Richard glanced toward the ballroom where the wealthy guests were getting restless. She could see him calculating, weighing his options. On one side, the humiliation of having no entertainment at the biggest fundraiser of the year. On the other side, the risk of letting a waitress sit at a $50,000 piano in front of 300 of the city's most influential people. "What would you play?" he asked finally. Elena's mind raced. She needed something that would grab their attention immediately. Something that would prove she wasn't wasting their time. Something that would show them she belonged on that stage, even if she was wearing a server's uniform. Rachmaninoff. Piano Concerto No. 2. Derek actually whistled low. That's pretty ambitious. Richard pulled out his phone, typing quickly. Elena realized he was probably looking up the piece, checking if it was real, if it was impressive enough. After a moment, his eyebrows went up. "It says here this is one of the most technically difficult pieces in classical piano repertoire." "It is." Elena said simply. And you can play it? The whole thing? I can play the parts that matter. The sections that showcase the piano. It's written for a full orchestra, but the piano can carry it alone if you know what you're doing. Richard looked at her for a long moment. In the background, they could hear the murmur of the crowd growing louder. Someone shouted something about getting a refund. A glass shattered. The natives were getting restless. If you mess this up, Richard said quietly, you're done. Not just tonight. Done here permanently. Elena nodded. She'd expected that. I understand. And if they hate it, you stop immediately. 1 piece. That's all you get. 1 piece is all I need. Richard took a deep breath, made his decision, and walked back toward the stage. Elena followed, her heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. Behind her, she heard the other staff members whispering, some encouraging, some doubtful. Jamie squeezed her shoulder as she passed. Good luck, he whispered. You're either very brave or very crazy. Probably both, Elena whispered back. Richard took the microphone from the flustered organizer. Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for the delay. Mr. Ashford is unfortunately unable to join us tonight due to weather complications. Groans and complaints rippled through the crowd. However, Richard continued, his voice stronger now, we have arranged for alternative entertainment. Please welcome Elena Torres. The confusion on their faces would have been funny if Elena wasn't so terrified. She walked onto the stage and the whispers started immediately. Is that the waitress? What is this? You've got to be kidding me. A woman in the front row dripping in diamonds actually laughed out loud. Not a polite chuckle. A full mocking laugh. She leaned over to the man next to her and said, loud enough for Elena to hear, well, I suppose the help needs to feel important sometimes. Elena felt her face burn. Every instinct screamed at her to run off the stage, to apologize, to go back to being invisible where it was safe. Her hands trembled as she walked to the piano bench. The piano was beautiful up close. A Steinway concert grand, probably worth more than Elena would make in 10 years of serving drinks. She sat down, adjusted the bench slightly, and let her fingers hover over the keys. The room hadn't gone quiet. People were still talking, still laughing, still treating this like a joke. Someone near the back shouted, Can we get our drinks while we wait for the real show? More laughter. Elena closed her eyes. She blocked it all out. The laughter. The doubt. The woman in diamonds. The 3 years of being invisible. She thought about her mom, sick and scared and trying to be brave. She thought about the scholarship letter she'd had to decline. She thought about the piano in her apartment with the blanket over it, silent and gathering dust. She thought about every dream she'd buried to survive. Then she placed her fingers on the keys and began to play. The opening notes of Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto number. 2 are soft, almost melancholy. They drift like a question being asked. Elena played them gently, precisely, her years of training flooding back into her muscle memory like water finding its old path. The room didn't quiet immediately, but a few people near the front stopped talking. Then the music builds. It grows. It becomes something bigger and more powerful. Elena's fingers moved faster, more confident now, dancing across the keys with a precision that only comes from thousands of hours of practice. The gentle question became a declaration. The melancholy transformed into something triumphant and defiant. Now people were definitely paying attention. The piece swelled. Where there should have been an orchestra, Elena made the piano sing with the voice of 100 instruments. Her left hand thundered out the bass notes while her right hand spun out melodies that seemed to float above the rhythm. She swayed slightly as she played, lost in the music, remembering what it felt like to be herself again. The woman who had laughed sat frozen, her mouth slightly open. Elena poured everything into the music. Every frustration, every sacrifice, every moment she'd smiled politely while being treated like she didn't matter. The piano responded like it had been waiting for her. The notes filled the massive ballroom, reaching into every corner, demanding attention, refusing to be ignored. This was the part of the concerto where the orchestra would normally take over, but Elena didn't pause. She adjusted, improvised slightly, made the piano do the work of an entire symphony. Her fingers flew across the keys so fast they blurred, but every note was clear. Every note was perfect. The entire room had gone silent now. 300 people who moments ago had been mocking her now sat transfixed. Some had tears in their eyes. Others looked stunned, like they'd been slapped awake from a dream. Elena hit the powerful crescendo, the part where the music swells to almost impossible heights. Her whole body moved with the effort, her fingers striking the keys with controlled force, the sound washing over the audience like a wave. Then, slowly, carefully, she brought it back down. The music softened. The fury transformed back into beauty, into something tender and hopeful. She played the final notes with the gentleness of someone saying goodbye to an old friend. The last note hung in the air, vibrating, fading slowly into silence. Elena lifted her fingers from the keys and opened her eyes. For a moment, nothing happened. The silence was so complete she could hear her own heartbeat. Then someone in the back stood up. Then another person. Then another. Within seconds, all 300 people were on their feet, applauding so loudly it sounded like thunder. The woman in diamonds had tears streaming down her face, her earlier mockery completely forgotten. The man who'd asked for drinks during her performance was clapping so hard his hands must have hurt. Elena stood slowly, shakily, barely able to process what was happening. The applause continued. It didn't stop. If anything, it got louder. Richard stood in the wings, his mouth hanging open in shock. Jamie was jumping up and down, pumping his fist in the air. Even Derek was clapping, shaking his head in disbelief, but Elena barely saw them. She stared out at the sea of standing, applauding people, these same people who 10 minutes ago hadn't even looked at her face. And something inside her, something that had been buried and broken and silent for 3 years, finally stirred back to life. She wasn't invisible anymore. The applause seemed to go on forever. Elena stood on the stage, her legs shaking, trying to understand what had just happened. Her hands were trembling now, the adrenaline finally catching up with her. She'd done it. She'd actually done it. But as the applause continued, something else started to happen. The reality of the moment began sinking in, and with it came a flood of emotions she hadn't expected. Relief, joy, but also something deeper. Something that felt almost like grief, because for 3 years, she'd convinced herself that giving up music was okay, that it was the right choice, that she could live without it. And in just 10 minutes of playing, she'd ripped open a wound she'd worked so hard to pretend didn't exist. A woman was making her way through the crowd toward the stage. She was older, maybe in her 60s, with silver hair pulled back in an elegant bun and sharp, intelligent eyes. She moved with the kind of confidence that comes from decades of being listened to. Excuse me, the woman said, waving people aside as she climbed the steps to the stage. She walked straight to Elena, ignoring everyone else. My dear, she said, her voice carrying an authority that made people automatically pay attention. That was extraordinary. Truly extraordinary. Up close, Elena recognized her.
Catherine Whitmore,
director of the city's Philharmonic Orchestra. Elena had seen her picture in the programs when she used to attend concerts, back when she still let herself go to those things. Thank you, Elena managed to say, her voice barely working. How long since you've performed? Catherine asked, studying Elena's face with an intensity that felt like being examined under a microscope. 5 years. Well, 5 years since I performed properly. 3 years since I've played at all, really. Catherine's eyebrows went up. You haven't played in 3 years and you just delivered that performance? That's not possible. I practiced in my head, Elena said, and it sounded absurd even as she said it. I'd go through the finger movements at night. Imagine the keys. I couldn't actually play because it hurt too much, but I couldn't completely forget either. Catherine nodded slowly, like this somehow made perfect sense to her. Muscle memory is extraordinary, but this goes beyond that. You have something rare. Something that can't be taught. She pulled a business card from her elegant clutch purse. Come to the Philharmonic Hall on Monday. 2:00. We're holding auditions for our spring season. Elena stared at the card like it might disappear if she looked away. I don't understand. I'm offering you an audition. A real one. We have an opening for a piano soloist. Catherine smiled slightly. Though I have to say, after what I just witnessed, calling it an audition feels like a formality. But I'm nobody, Elena blurted out. I'm a waitress who went to music school for 1 semester 5 years ago. You're a musician who's been surviving, Catherine corrected. There's a difference. Monday, 2:00. Don't make me wait. Before Elena could respond, more people were surrounding her. The woman in diamonds who'd laughed at her earlier pushed through the crowd, her makeup smeared from crying. I'm so sorry, she said, grabbing Elena's hand. I'm so terribly sorry for laughing. You were magnificent. I've been to dozens of classical concerts and I've never been moved like that. A man in an expensive suit stepped forward next. I'm David Chen. I run a concert series at the university. We'd love to have you perform. Here's my card. Then another person, and another. Suddenly, Elena's hands were full of business cards. People wanted her email address, her phone number. They wanted to book her for private events, charity concerts, recording sessions. The attention was overwhelming, dizzying, surreal. Richard appeared at her elbow, looking completely stunned. Elena, I had no idea. Why didn't you ever say anything? You never asked, she said simply without bitterness. It was just a fact. He had the grace to look embarrassed. Right. Well, obviously you're not working the rest of the night. Take the evening off. Paid, of course. Elena nodded, still clutching the business cards, still trying to process everything. She needed air. She needed space. She needed to think. She made her way off the stage and through the crowd, people still trying to stop her and talk to her. She smiled and nodded and promised to follow up, but kept moving until she reached the service hallway that led to the staff areas. The door closed behind her, muffling the noise from the ballroom. Jamie found her there a few minutes later, leaning against the wall, staring at nothing. You okay? He asked gently. I don't know, Elena said honestly. I think so. Maybe. I have no idea what just happened. What happened is you just became the most talked about person at a gala full of millionaires. That's what happened. Jamie grinned. Do you know how many people ask me about you? They all want to know your story, who you are, where you came from. Elena laughed, but it came out shaky. I came from the kitchen, with a tray of champagne. Not anymore, you didn't. Jamie gestured back toward the ballroom. Those people are going to remember this night for years, and they're going to remember you. That's what scared her, Elena realized. Being remembered. Being seen. For 3 years, invisibility had been her armor. It was safe. It didn't demand anything from her except to show up and do her job and go home. But now that armor was gone, ripped away in 10 minutes of music, and she had no idea what came next. Her phone buzzed. A text from her mom. How's work tonight, honey? Elena stared at the message. How could she even begin to explain? She started typing several times and deleted it each time. Finally, she just wrote, Something happened. Something good, I think. I'll tell you when I get home. The response came immediately. Can't wait to hear. Love you. Elena pocketed her phone and looked down at the business cards in her hand. Catherine Whitmore's was on top. The director of the Philharmonic Orchestra wanted her to audition. Her, the waitress who'd given up. What are you going to do? Jamie asked. I have no idea, Elena admitted. This is terrifying. Yeah, but it's also amazing, right? I mean, this is what you wanted, what you trained for. 5 years ago, yes. But now? Elena shook her head. I have bills, responsibilities. My mom's medical debt. This job pays regularly. It's stable. What if I chase this music thing and it doesn't work out? What if tonight was just a fluke? A fluke? Jamie looked at her like she was crazy. Did you see those people? Did you hear that applause? That wasn't a fluke. That was talent. Real, genuine, undeniable talent. Talent doesn't pay bills. Maybe not, but neither does regret. Elena didn't have an answer for that. She pushed off the wall and headed toward the staff locker room. She needed to get out of this uniform. She needed to go home and think and maybe have a good cry because her emotions were all over the place, and she couldn't process any of it while still standing in the Grandview Hotel. In the locker room, she changed into her street clothes, jeans, and a simple sweater. Her work uniform felt different now as she hung it in her locker, like it belonged to a different person. Or maybe she was a different person now. She wasn't sure. As she was leaving through the back entrance that employees used, she nearly ran into Richard again. He was checking his phone, probably dealing with the chaos her performance had created. "Elena, wait," he said when he saw her. "I wanted to talk to you about something." "If this is about Monday, I'll be here for my shift," she said quickly. "Actually, that's what I wanted to discuss. The hotel's board of directors called me just now. They were all at the gala tonight, obviously. They saw what happened." He paused. "They want to offer you a position as the Grandview's resident pianist. You'd perform 3 nights a week in the lobby lounge. The pay is triple what you make now as a server." Elena's breath caught. "What?" They were extremely impressed. "And honestly, after tonight, you're going to be famous around here. People will come to the Grandview just to hear you play. It's good for business, good for everyone." Richard smiled awkwardly. "So, what do you say?" Elena looked at him, then at the business card still clutched in her hand. Catherine Whitmore's audition on Monday, the hotel's offer of triple her current salary, all of it swirling together with the memory of how it felt to play again, to be seen again, to matter again. "Can I think about it?" she asked. "Of course. Take the weekend. Let me know Monday." Monday. Everything was happening on Monday. Elena walked out into the cool night air, her mind racing. The city stretched out before her, full of lights and possibilities and terrifying unknowns. Somewhere in her apartment, under a blanket, sat her piano, waiting, silent. Maybe it was time to uncover it. Maybe it was time to stop running from who she used to be and figure out who she could become. But tonight she just needed to go home and tell her mom what happened. Everything else could wait until Monday. Elena's mom was still awake when she got home, which wasn't surprising. She always waited up, even though Elena told her not to. The apartment was small, just 2 bedrooms in an older building, but it was home. The smell of her mom's chamomile tea greeted her as she opened the door. "You're back early," her mom called from the living room. "Everything okay?" Elena walked in and just stood there for a moment looking at her mother. She was sitting in her favorite chair, the worn blue one they'd had forever, wrapped in a blanket despite the heater running. The cancer treatments had been over for almost a year, but she still got cold easily. "I played tonight," Elena said quietly. Her mom's face went very still. "Played what?" "Piano. At the gala. The main performer canceled and I volunteered." The words came tumbling out faster now. "Mom, I played in front of 300 people and they gave me a standing ovation. The director of the Philharmonic wants me to audition. The hotel wants to hire me as their resident pianist. People were giving me their cards and crying, and I don't know what to do, and I'm terrified and excited, and I haven't felt this alive in 3 years." Her mom set down her tea very carefully. Then she stood up, walked over, and pulled Elena into a tight hug. Elena felt her mom's shoulders shaking and realized she was crying. "Mom, what's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong, baby. Nothing at all." Her mom pulled back, wiping her eyes. "I've been waiting for this moment for 3 years. I just didn't think it would actually come." "What do you mean?" Her mom led her to the couch and they sat down together. "Elena, do you know what the hardest part of being sick was? It wasn't the pain or the treatments or even the fear of dying. It was watching you give up your dreams for me. Watching you bury that gift you have because I needed you. I wanted to help you. I chose to come home. I know you did. And I love you for it. But I've watched you disappear a little bit every day for 3 years. Watched you become smaller and quieter and more invisible. You stopped talking about music, you covered up your piano. You became someone who just exists instead of someone who lives." Her mom squeezed her hand. "Tonight, you came back. I can see it in your eyes. You're here again." Elena felt tears starting. "But what if I fail? What if I'm not good enough? I've been out of practice for so long. Those people at the gala, they were probably just being polite. And we still have bills and debt and—" "Stop." Her mom's voice was gentle but firm. "You've spent 3 years taking care of me. Let me take care of you now. Go to that audition on Monday. see what happens, and whatever you decide, I'll support you. But please, please don't let my illness be the reason you give up on yourself again." They stayed up talking until almost 2 in the morning. About the performance, about the opportunities, about the fear and the hope and everything in between. When Elena finally went to bed, she felt lighter somehow, like she'd been carrying a weight she didn't even know was there. Sunday morning, she did something she hadn't done in 3 years. She walked over to the piano in the corner of the living room and pulled off the blanket. Dust floated in the sunlight streaming through the window. She sat down at the bench, lifted the fallboard, and stared at the keys. Her hands were shaking again. What if Friday night had been luck? What if she tried to play now and nothing came out? What if she'd used up all her skill in that one performance and there was nothing left? She placed her fingers on the keys. They felt foreign and familiar at the same time, like coming home after years away and finding everything slightly different than you remembered. She pressed down gently, playing a simple scale. The piano was out of tune, some keys sticking slightly. But the sound was there. She played another scale, then a chord progression. Then, before she could overthink it, she launched into a piece by Chopin, one of her favorites from years ago. Her fingers stumbled at first. She hit wrong notes, lost the tempo, had to stop and start over twice. But slowly, gradually, muscle memory took over. The music began to flow. Not perfect, not like Friday night, but real and alive in hers. She played for 2 hours straight, only stopping when her mom brought her coffee and toast. The apartment filled with music for the first time in years, and with it came memories. Good ones. Of high school recitals and competition wins and acceptance letters and dreams that had felt so close she could taste them. Monday morning arrived too fast and too slow at the same time. Elena changed outfits 4 times before settling on simple black pants and a nice blue blouse. Professional but not pretentious. She wanted to look like someone who belonged at a Philharmonic audition, not someone trying too hard to prove something. The Philharmonic Hall was downtown, a beautiful old building with marble columns and ornate architecture. Elena had been here once before, years ago, for a concert, back when she still let herself come to places like this, back when seeing other people perform didn't feel like looking through a window at a life she couldn't have. She checked in at the front desk and was directed to wait in a small room with several other pianists. They all looked polished and confident, talking about recent performances and upcoming concerts. One guy mentioned studying in Vienna. A woman casually dropped that she'd performed at Carnegie Hall last month. Elena felt completely out of her depth. These were professionals, real musicians with real careers. What was she doing here? She was a waitress who'd played one good performance at a hotel gala. Elena Torres? She looked up to find an assistant at the door, checking a clipboard. "You're up next." Her heart started racing. This was it. No going back now. The audition room was smaller than she'd expected. Just a grand piano and several chairs where Catherine Whitmore sat with 2 other people Elena didn't recognize. They looked up as she entered, their faces neutral and professional. "Elena," Catherine said warmly, "thank you for coming. This is Robert Chen, our principal conductor, and Diana Foster, our artistic director." Elena shook their hands, trying not to let them see how badly hers were trembling. "We'd like you to play 2 pieces, Catherine continued. "One of your choosing, and then we'll request something specific. Take your time, settle yourself. Whenever you're ready." Elena sat at the piano. It was a beautiful instrument, perfectly tuned, probably worth more than her entire apartment building. She placed her hands on the keys and took a deep breath. Then she played the same piece she'd played at the gala, Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2. But this time there was no crowd cheering her on. No adrenaline from proving people wrong. No emotion from years of suppressed dreams suddenly breaking free. This was just her and the piano and 3 people judging whether she was good enough, and somehow that made it harder. She stumbled in a section she'd nailed on Friday night. Her timing felt off in places. The power and emotion that had moved people to tears at the gala didn't quite translate in this sterile audition room. When she finished, the 3 judges wrote notes on their papers without any readable expression. "Very nice," Robert said noncommittally. "Now we'd like you to play Debussy's Clair de Lune." Clair de Lune, of course. It was a standard audition piece, one that tested a pianist's ability to play with subtlety and control rather than power. Elena nodded and began to play. This piece was different, gentler. It required a soft touch and an understanding of dynamics that went beyond technical skill. Elena let herself sink into it, remembering how her first piano teacher had described this piece as painting with sound. Something shifted as she played. The nervousness began to fade. She stopped thinking about the judges and the audition and whether she was good enough. She just played. The music flowed through her fingers like water, each note carefully placed, building a mood that was both melancholy and peaceful. When she finished, she looked up to find Catherine smiling slightly. "Thank you, Elena," she said. "We'll be in touch by the end of the week." That was it. Elena stood, thanked them, and left the room. In the hallway, she leaned against the wall and let out a long breath. She had no idea if she'd done well or terribly. The judges' faces had given nothing away. The other pianists in the waiting room looked at her as she walked past, trying to gauge from her expression how difficult the audition had been. She gave them a small smile but said nothing. Outside, the city was busy with Monday afternoon traffic. People rushed past on their way to important places. Elena stood on the steps of the Philharmonic Hall and pulled out her phone. She had 3 missed calls from Richard at the hotel, probably wondering about her decision on the resident pianist position. She also had a text from an unknown number. "Hi, Elena. This is David Chen from the University Concert Series. Just wanted to follow up on our conversation Friday night. We'd love to have you perform at our spring showcase. Are you available the 3rd Saturday in April?" Elena stared at the message. The 3rd Saturday in April, 3 months away. By then, she could know if she got the Philharmonic position, or she could be back to serving drinks full-time, or something else entirely. She typed back, "I'll need to check my schedule and get back to you." It was a safe answer, a way to buy time while she figured out what she was doing with her life. Her phone rang. Richard again. She answered this time. "Elena, hi. Did you think about our offer?" She looked up at the Philharmonic Hall behind her, then down at the city streets below. 2 different paths, 2 different versions of her future. "Can I have until Friday?" she asked. "I need a little more time." Richard hesitated, then agreed. "Friday, but that's the final deadline. The board needs an answer." When she hung up, Elena realized she was smiling despite all the uncertainty, because for the first time in 3 years she had choices. Real choices. And whatever happened next, she was finally moving forward instead of just surviving. The week crawled by like it was moving through thick mud. Elena went back to work at the Grandview on Tuesday and everything felt different. The other servers treated her like a celebrity, asking questions about the audition and the performance. Guests who'd been at the gala recognized her and asked for pictures. Even Richard seemed uncertain how to act around her, like she was suddenly too important to be carrying trays. It was exhausting. By Wednesday, Elena had received 12 more emails from people wanting to book her for events, private parties, corporate functions, wedding receptions. Some offered good money, the kind of money that would make a real dent in her mom's medical debt. But accepting those gigs felt like admitting she wasn't going to get the Philharmonic position, like she was settling before she even knew what her options were. Thursday afternoon, she was refilling salt shakers in the dining room when her phone buzzed. Unknown number. Her heart jumped. She stepped into the hallway to answer. "Hello? Elena, this is Catherine Whitmore." The voice was warm but professional. "Do you have a moment to talk?" Elena's mouth went dry. "Yes, of course. I wanted to call you personally rather than sending a formal letter. The selection committee met this morning to discuss all the auditions from this week." Catherine paused, and in that pause, Elena felt her entire future hanging in balance. "Elena, I'm not going to lie to you. Your audition on Monday was good, but it wasn't your best work. We could see you were nervous, and some of the technical execution wasn't as clean as what we witnessed at the gala." Elena's heart sank. This was it. The rejection. She'd blown her chance by being too nervous, too rusty, too everything. "However," Catherine continued, "what you showed us at the gala was extraordinary. That kind of raw talent and emotional depth can't be faked or taught. The committee and I believe that with proper training and regular practice, you could be exceptional. Which is why we'd like to offer you a position." Elena nearly dropped the phone. "What?" "It's not the solo position we originally discussed. That's going to someone with more recent performance experience. But we have an opening for a second piano in our ensemble, and we'd like you to fill it. The pay isn't spectacular, I'll be honest." It's enough to live on, but you won't be getting rich. You'd also be required to attend rehearsals 3 times a week and perform in about a dozen concerts throughout the season. Elena couldn't find words. I don't know what to say. Say yes, Catherine said simply. Say yes and give yourself a chance to become the musician you were meant to be. Or say no, and keep wondering what if for the rest of your life. Those are really your only 2 options. Elena leaned against the wall, her mind racing. The money from the Philharmonic wouldn't be enough to cover all her expenses. She'd still have bills, still have debt. But it was a real position, with a real orchestra, playing real music. Can I think about it? Elena asked. I have another offer I'm considering and I need to. You have until tomorrow at 5, Catherine interrupted gently. I'm sorry for the short deadline, but we need to finalize our roster for the season. I hope you'll say yes, Elena. I really do. After they hung up, Elena stood in the hallway for a long moment, staring at nothing. 2 offers now. The hotel wanted her as their resident pianist for triple her current server salary. Safe, stable, guaranteed income. The Philharmonic wanted her in their ensemble for less money but a real chance at a music career. Risky, uncertain, but exactly what she'd dreamed about. She went back to work in a daze, mechanically going through the motions of her shift. Jamie noticed, You okay? You look like you've seen a ghost. The Philharmonic offered me a position, Elena said quietly, making sure no one else could hear. But the money isn't great, and Richard wants an answer about the resident pianist job by tomorrow too. Jamie whistled low. That's huge. Both of those are huge. What are you going to do? I have no idea. That night, Elena sat at her kitchen table with her mom, a notebook between them. On one side of the page, she'd written hotel pianist. On the other, Philharmonic ensemble. Under each heading, she'd listed pros and cons. The hotel job made more sense on paper. Better money, flexible schedule, security. She could keep her apartment, pay down the medical debt faster, and still play music every day. But the Philharmonic was the dream. The real dream. Orchestra performances. Professional musicians. The chance to grow and learn and maybe, eventually, work her way up to better positions. What does your gut tell you? Her mom asked. My gut is terrified of both options, Elena admitted. The hotel feels safe but also like giving up. The Philharmonic feels exciting but also like I'm risking everything on something that might not work out. Her mom reached across the table and took her hand. Baby, let me tell you something. When I was sick, lying in that hospital bed going through chemo, you know what I thought about? I thought about all the things I'd been too scared to do. All the chances I didn't take because they felt risky. All the dreams I put off because the timing never felt right. She squeezed Elena's hand. The timing is never right. There's never a perfect moment when everything lines up and the path is clear. You just have to jump and figure out the rest on the way down. But what about the debt? What about, I'm working again, her mom interrupted. Part-time, but it's something. And we'll figure out the rest. We always do. But Elena, I don't want you to choose the safe option because you're afraid. If you want the hotel job because it genuinely makes you happy, then take it. But if you're just choosing it because it's less scary, then you're making a mistake. Elena stared at the notebook, at the 2 columns of pros and cons that suddenly didn't seem to matter as much as they had 10 minutes ago. Friday morning. She called Catherine first. I accept, Elena said, her voice shaking slightly. I'd be honored to join the Philharmonic ensemble. She could hear the smile in Catherine's voice. Wonderful. I'll have the contracts sent over today. Welcome to the orchestra, Elena. I think you're going to do great things. Next, she called Richard. That conversation was harder. I appreciate the offer, I really do, Elena told him. But I'm taking a position with the Philharmonic. I'll still work my regular server shifts until you find a replacement, but I can't take the pianist job. Richard was silent for a moment. That's disappointing, but I understand. For what it's worth, I think you're making a brave choice. And hey, you'll still be around the hotel. Maybe we can book you for special events sometime. I'd like that, Elena said, and meant it. Her last call was to David Chen at the university. About that spring showcase in April, she said. I'm available. I'd love to perform. 3 months later, Elena stood backstage at the Philharmonic Hall, waiting for her first major performance with the orchestra. She was wearing a long black dress, her hair pulled back, her hands surprisingly steady despite the nerves. Through the curtain, she could hear the audience taking their seats. Her mom was out there somewhere, front row. Jamie had come too, along with several of the servers from the Grand View. Even Richard had bought a ticket. Catherine appeared beside her. "Ready?" Elena took a deep breath. "I think so. Still can't believe this is real." "Believe it," Catherine said. "You earned this. Now go out there and show them what you can do." The orchestra filed onto the stage to applause. Elena took her seat at the piano, the stage lights warm on her face. She looked out at the audience, at all those faces waiting to hear music, waiting to hear her. A year ago she'd been invisible, a waitress in a black uniform, serving drinks to people who didn't see her. 6 months ago she'd been too afraid to even touch her piano. 3 months ago she'd taken a chance that had terrified her, and now she was here, really here, living the dream she'd thought was dead. The conductor raised his baton. The orchestra lifted their instruments. Elena placed her fingers on the keys, and when the music started, she didn't think about medical bills or missed opportunities or years of being invisible. She didn't think about the risk she'd taken or the uncertainty that still lay ahead. She just played. The music filled the hall, rising and falling, powerful and delicate and absolutely alive. Elena played like she'd been born to do this because maybe she had been. The audience disappeared. The stage disappeared. There was only the music and the moment and the overwhelming joy of finally being exactly where she was supposed to be. When the piece ended and the applause began, Elena looked out at the audience and saw her mom in the front row, tears streaming down her face, clapping so hard her hands must have hurt. Jamie was whistling and cheering. Even strangers were on their feet, but this time the applause felt different than it had at the gala. This wasn't surprise or novelty or the shock of an invisible waitress suddenly being seen. This was recognition, respect. This was the applause for a real musician, playing with a real orchestra, living a real life. Elena stood and bowed with the other musicians. Her heart so full it felt like it might burst. She'd taken the risk. She'd jumped without knowing if there was a net to catch her, and she'd found something better than safety. She'd found herself. The invisible waitress was gone. The musician had come home, and the music finally wouldn't be silent again.